And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everyone, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at a game that was on Kickstarter, has since been fulfilled, and it's a game by Stonemaier Games, who were the creators of Viticulture. This time, we have Euphoria, which is a worker placement game set in a dystopian society in which you're trying to gather commodities, change them in for resources and artifacts, and place your authority out onto the board in order to be the first person to place it all, and whoever does so will be the winner. I want to let everybody know that the copy I have here is a Kickstarter copy, so it includes some upgraded components that may not come in your copy if you buy one of the non-Kickstarters. That's mainly the gold stone, and the bricks that you'll see here that are kind of ceramic-y or metal pieces will look different in your copy if you're to buy it, but otherwise the game is going to be pretty much identical. The play is going to be the same. So, real quick, why don't we just take a look at what you get inside of this box, again, with the reminder that some of the components may not be what you get. We'll see how the game plays, and then we'll come back here at the end, and we'll get my opinions on Euphoria. So here you can see Euphoria all set up for a 3-player game. Now, with fewer or more players, there will be fewer or more of these different spaces available in the territories on the board. That's the only change for the game, more or less territories open. These territories are places where you can place these authority markers. Each player will have 10 of these authority markers that they're trying to place on the board, either in territories or on markets or even on their own recruits, in order to get rid of them all. And the first player to place all 10 will win the game, if they're the only player to place all 10 at that time. So just note that the game won't scale a whole lot based on the players, except for that there are less spaces available if you have fewer players. Anyhow, this is essentially a worker placement game where you're racing to the end, trying to place all of these markers. Each player is going to start the game with a couple of workers, which are these dice. And these dice have values on them, 1 through 6. You're going to roll them at the beginning of the game, and this is going to be their knowledge. This one is a 2 right here, and a 3 right here. This is their knowledge, and it'll be their value when you place them out on the board. The reason this is important is sometimes higher values will be better or lower values will be better, and if you have the same knowledge on your worker, you can actually place 2 workers on your turn instead of 1, or 3 if you have 3 that are the same knowledge, whatever that case may be. In addition, each player is going to start the game with a couple of recruits. You actually get 4 and choose 2 based on what you like. These are going to be kind of the factions that you're going to want to advance in the game in order to hopefully get these recruits flipped face up and get their special abilities. So we can see this guy here is a Wastelander by the W and the fact that he's orange in color. There's a Wastelander faction of power here that you will try and raise up. And when you get it to a certain level, he'll flip over and he'll give you an ability that allows you to gain a resource and draw a card anytime you lose a worker based on knowledge. You also have a Euphorian for this player. The Euphorians are here in the central portion of the board. And he says, when you retrieve workers, you may pay lightning instead of paying oranges, or you can pay your bliss up here. And if you do, you lose a knowledge and you gain a morale. That's a good thing. So you're going to want those to be flipped face up so that you can do that when you have the option. Now, I know this board looks rather confusing, but once you get used to it, it's actually not so bad. There are several different defined areas, and each of the lower 3 areas are kind of built the same way. They all have a resource generation spot, which is here, here, and here. They all have markets, which are here, here, and here. They all have a territory you can place on, which are here, here, and here. And then they're going to have an artifact market where you can buy, or where you can trade in artifacts for placing tokens and kind of advancing the allegiance of your places. And they all have a tunnel where you can dig in order to get specific resources here, here, and here. The upper area is a little bit different. It has an artifact market where you can trade in artifacts in order to place some of your authority tokens and advance the faction down here. It has some pre-built markets out here where you can trade in resources for various different things, and it has its own resource area and territory up here up top. But basically, the layout is pretty straightforward once you get used to it. There's also a couple of extra places. We have the allegiance track here, where allegiance will go up as certain things happen in the game, making certain allegiances stronger and other ones not as strong, and eventually allowing you to reveal your recruits. You're also going to have an area where you can retrieve all of your workers from the board, and where you can buy more workers to add to your supply down there at the bottom. On the top here, you have 2 tracks which are for your morale. Each player has its own morale, and the higher your morale, the more cards you can hold in your hand, these artifact cards that you'll get throughout the game. And you're going to have a knowledge track, and the higher your knowledge, the worse off you are. You don't want your citizens being knowledgeable. That is going to be the number that you're going to have to compare to, or add to your comparison, when you're trying to see if you lose any workers. And anytime you get workers back from the board, you're going to re-roll them, and then you're going to total up the value of all of your workers that aren't placed on the board. I have 2, 5. I would then add this value here, 8, and then I'd see if that number is greater than or equal to 16. If it is, I'm going to lose the highest worker. So you want your knowledge to remain low so that you can have more workers when you roll your dice and stay underneath a value of 16. The way this game works is that on your turn you're either going to place a worker, or if you have multiple of the same knowledge workers, you're going to place multiple workers, or you're going to take back workers from the board. So you're going to do one of those two things. And your choice will be based on what is available on the board, what you'd like to place, and of course how many workers you have left. And if you have no workers left, you're going to have to take your workers back. When you place a worker, you're going to place it on several different types of areas. For example, there's the farm over here, or the corresponding generator, or the aquifer that's going to generate fruit, water, lightning, or you can generate bliss up here. And these are the basic commodities of the game that you can generate. When you place, you're going to get a number of commodities and some other bonuses based on what the total value of all dice in this area is. So if I place a 3 here, I'm going to get 1 fruit, and I'm going to advance this track 1 space. When this track goes up higher, there's going to be benefits that are available to players who have a revealed recruit from that faction. So we see that this player has one of these recruits, but he's not revealed yet. When he gets revealed, that player will get bonuses at the farm if we're up here, meaning that whenever he places on the farm, he's going to get an extra fruit. If it gets higher, when he places on the tunnel for this faction, he's actually going to get a brick and a card. Or when he gets all the way up to the top here, he's going to be able to reveal his faction if it's not, reveal his recruit if it's not already revealed, and then those benefits will come into play immediately. At the top of each of these tracks, when you get here, you get to place one of your authority tokens on each of your revealed faction members of that color. So having them revealed and then getting to the top of that track will allow you to place authority tokens and of course get closer to ending the game. And those tracks are all the same, except for the Icarites, which are up here at the top. Since they don't have a tunnel, when you get to the second area, you get to draw a card anytime you place out onto their territory. So it's slightly different, but note, you're trying to advance these tracks to benefit your own interests. So, when you place out here with the 3, you get 1 fruit and you advance that track. If the total had been 5 or 8, you would have gone down a knowledge. And if the total were 9 or higher, you'd actually get 2 fruit, but gain a knowledge. And all of the different market tracks are the same for that type of placement. Placing on a tunnel is going to require that you pay one of the commodities. This one is water, and when you place here, you either get to take a stone or a card, and each of these tracks is going to be similar. This one will give you a gold or a card, while this one over here will give you either a brick or a card. So you get your choices to based which one you place on, and which resources you're willing to pay when you go there, or which commodities you're willing to pay. The resources, not commodities, are going to be brick, stone, and gold, and those will have different uses throughout the game. But basically, you can place on one of these, pay a commodity, and get a resource or an artifact card. When you place on a market, you're going to have to pay one of the resources that I just showed you, brick, stone, or gold. When you place here, this die needs to stay there until enough people have contributed there in order to build the markets that are available out here. So you'll see these face-down tiles. These tiles are going to have negative things on the other side. They're also going to have an action associated with them when you flip them over. So, essentially, you're going to place out here, you're going to pay in your stone, and then you need somebody else to place onto this market area. In a 3-player game, only 2 people need to place here, but with the more players you have, the more people will have to occupy these tracks at the same time. When the requirements are met, you're going to flip this tile over, it's going to slide over, bumping all of these dice off, and now you'll see there's an action available. That is, you can pay 4 fruit and an artifact card in order to place here. When you do so, you're going to go ahead and move up the correct allegiance track, and you're going to place one of your stars out here on the appropriate territory. When this happens, you're essentially going to be placing out 1/10 of your way to beating the game, or winning the game. So this is a good way to get out here, and it advances the allegiance that maybe you want to advance. Correspondingly, there's an artifact market next to that you can place on, and when you place here, you have to pay 3 artifact cards, or 2 identical artifact cards that you'll be collecting throughout the game. You'll see these are things like glasses, or cigar boxes, or teddy bears, different old artifacts that'll be available, and you're trying to collect these in order to pay them. When you do so, you'll get to place a star onto a market that you're not already on. I failed to mention that when you help build a market, you immediately get to place a star on there when it's complete. So, you would place a star on there for helping contribute to it. If you didn't have a star in there, you would be able to place one of your stars on there by turning this in and advancing the correct allegiance track, of course. Anyone who doesn't have a star on a market is going to suffer a penalty. You'll see this market here says you lose an extra heart, which is morale, when you retrieve your workers for free. More on that later, but anybody who doesn't have a star on this will suffer that. So you're going to want to get a star on there as fast as possible because bad things are, of course, bad. So, now we see how all of these different building works. What else is there on the board? One thing I forgot to mention regarding mines is when you move or when you place on a mine, you're always going to advance this guy one space. And this is one way to reveal some of your hidden recruits. Either other people can reveal them for you, or you'll get to reveal them by placing your own dice. But when this miner gets all the way to this space here, meaning several people have placed on the mine, either trying to get stone or artifacts, they're eventually going to land on this spot. And anybody who has a corresponding subterranean person is going to flip that person over. So you can activate your recruit by going further on the mining, or you can activate them by, of course, increasing the subterranean allegiance by placing on several different areas that will increase that, such as placing over here on the aquifer, or placing to contribute artifacts in order to place out stars will increase the subterranean if you're placing on a subterranean building. So, forgot to mention that, but it's kind of an important aspect of the game. There are two more places to cover on this board, so we've covered each of the different types of places that exist in each of the different areas, but we haven't covered how to retrieve your workers from the board. There are really 2 or 3 ways you can retrieve workers. One is that if you've placed on an area and somebody else places there to bump you off, you get your worker back for free and you roll it immediately, of course checking the total value of your workers plus the value of your knowledge on the board against 16 to see if you lose a worker. Otherwise, you're going to get workers back by paying for them or just choosing not to pay for them. But when you decide to take workers back, you may take as many as you want off of the board. You can pay either a fruit, which is, the fruit that you can collect, or a bliss, which you can collect, in order to take all of your workers back and gain 2 morale, which increases your hand size of artifacts that you can hold. Otherwise, if you don't want to or can't pay this, you can go ahead and lose 1 morale, moving down on the morale track, in order to take your workers back. And of course, that is kind of not as good as paying, but hey, you can still get them back and continue to play the game. You may also get more workers. That's down here in the bottom corner. Getting more workers is going to cost you either 3 electricity or 3 water. If you pay the electricity, you're going to move down 2 on the knowledge track. Being low on knowledge is good because that's less that you have to add when you're comparing to 16. When you pay 3 water, you'll gain 2 morale and get a new worker. Of course, adding it to your supply, rolling it, and checking it against your knowledge to see if you're over 16, and if you are, losing a worker. So that's the basic concept of the game. You're going to be trying to build up your workforce, use that workforce to collect different commodities, trade those commodities for resources to build markets, try and get artifacts and stuff that you can turn in order to place out your authority tokens in different types of territories on the board in order to place all of those authority tokens. Now there's a couple things I didn't mention, like when you get to the end of a mine, it opens up a new action and you can place a die out here to get 3 fruit, or it could be 3 electricity or 3 water. It's just a new action that happens by completing that tunnel. There's also a card that each player has, which serves as their reference card, but on the reverse side there's an ability. You can play this ability once per game in order to kind of make a decision, either to publish an expose on the utopian, or I guess not utopian, but dystopian environment that you're in, or you can decide to support them, publishing propaganda and joining the dystopia, supporting them. Whether you do so, you either pay glasses or any 2 artifacts, and you have your choice. You can either draw 2 recruits and keep it if you're going to kind of fight the establishment, and those will be more of these recruit cards that you can keep. If these happen to be recruits that should already be flipped over when you take it, you'll flip it over and get the ability, and if it's at the end of the track, you'll actually get to place a token on it, so that can be beneficial. If you decide to support the dystopia, you're going to go ahead and immediately place one of your authority tokens on this card. So this can be a surprise ending to the game if you have the appropriate artifacts, can place it out and place your last star immediately. Anyhow, you're essentially going to keep on playing, trying to place out your tokens onto these different territories, trying to place them out onto the different markets, both to get them on the board and avoid the penalties, and trying to get your recruits flipped over so that you can either place stars on them or use the abilities, and whoever manages to best get all of their stars out the quickest will be the winner. Well, there you have it. That is Euphoria by Stonemaier Games. Now, this is a game that I was very excited about. One, the theme is amazing. I love dystopian themes. I read all kinds of dystopian novels, 1984, Oryx and Crake, all that type of stuff. It's one of my favorite genres of things, so it's nice to finally see a worker placement or any board game kind of venture into this area, and especially one that's done so well. Now, this is a lighter game. It's not the first dice placement, worker placement game to be done, but it implements those those mechanisms very well. So you're rolling your dice, you're placing them on the board, and you're deciding whether or not you want to bump somebody off, or whether you want to place somewhere else for a different benefit, or whether you just want to take all of your workers back. When you place a die and bump somebody off, you have to decide whether it's worth letting them have another worker to place, potentially giving them the option to place multiple workers on their turn if they roll well, or sometimes kicking a worker off the board to make them roll and hopefully exceed the knowledge that they're allowed to have and lose a worker overall. So that's a very interesting aspect to this game, is when to bump somebody off, when it's beneficial for you, when it's beneficial for them, and whether or not you want to give them that option. So I think that's very interesting and semi-unique amongst worker placement games overall. I also kind of like the mechanism of having to buy your workers back, or having the option of buying your workers back, and if you do buy them back, kind of increasing the overall morale, which is good. But if you don't buy them back, of course, decreasing morale. Apparently they're not worth enough for you to buy them back. So the theme is well done. I think the dice placement, although not unique, is a little bit of a unique feel in this game because of the way it's implemented. And overall, I think the game plays quick and has an interesting aspect to it. I'm not the biggest fan always of race to the end to a certain number of victory point games, and I think a little bit of that comes through here. It's not my favorite game of all time. I do like it. I like it quite a bit, and I think it's very well done. I'm going to keep it in my collection, and I'm hoping to play it more in the future. But I think the race aspect kind of sullies it a little bit for me. I'm just not a huge fan of set endgame points where one player clearly wins because they were out faster, and sometimes there's really not a great way to catch up. So you have to pay attention to that in this game, but overall I think it's a very good game, very great, excellent theme, and well-implemented use of established mechanisms.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.